Frank McGreevy, thanks and welcome to Over the Bonnet.
Thank you.
You're a World War II veteran, and it's a great honour to have you in the studio to talk about your experiences and your life. Let's go right back to those halcyon days when you signed up for service for Australia. Tell us how it all came about.
Well, I was working for a firm called Sydney Williams in Rockhampton, and the wage was pretty small, and all my friends, they had turned 18, and in those days you had to register for the forces, and so I said, well, I'm not staying here on my own, so I put my age up to 18. I was 17 at the time, and I went to the Rockhampton Drill Hall and signed a paper, and I went back to the company I worked for, and the chap in charge, his name was Kingston, Mr. Kingston. He said, you cannot leave us, we're a protected industry. Well, I said, I'm leaving this Friday, Mr. Kingston. I'm in the army now. He wasn't too happy, but
what were you doing then at Kingston's?
We were making Comet windmills, Sydney Williams shearing sheds, and also we had a contract for the army to lay out cables that they installed on the back of the truck and run the cables out on drums. And he said it was restricted. I said, too bad. So I said, I'll see you after the war. And, on the Saturday, I turned up at the drill hall, and we never marched. We strolled down to the railway station, and the railway station was right on the corner near the Great Western Hotel. So we had to have a few drinks, and then we got into the train station, and a train pulled in, and it was just a local passenger train. There were no toilets or nothing in the carriages. Then we arrived in Brisbane exhibition grounds.
How was the feeling in the train from the guys that you were with? You'd signed up, you're off to war, you really didn't have any real idea, I'd say. Did you have any idea of what you were signing up for?
Not one bit, no. No, I just didn't want to be stuck in Rockhampton without my friends. I'll put it that way here. There's three of them, and we all went together.
What was the atmosphere like on the train when you're heading for Brisbane?
We were partaking of quite a bit of liquor, and so there was singing and carrying on, and we thought it was just a train ride. Quite amusing, yes. I suppose roughly about 20 to 30 of us. There wasn't only 3 or 4 of us, and down to the showgrounds.
You turn up at the showgrounds?
Exhibition grounds, yeah.
What happened then?
Well, they gave us a big bag and told us to fill it with hay, and which we did, and that was our mattress. We were there about a week, I suppose, and of a morning they would march us to the Normanby Hotel, and the sergeant, he was a return man from the Middle East. He would be at the door right on 10 o'clock when the bar opened. So we would be over the road, and by the time he broke us off for a quarter of an hour break, he'd be in the bar and he'd be on his second pot. So by the time we got a pot, he would be singing out, righto, come on, we're going back to the showgrounds now. So that carried on for about a week, I suppose. At least a week, yes. And then we were told to pack up. We never had much army clothes. Well, we never had much at all. It was mostly civilian clothes, and we were told to pack up. We were leaving for Gundawindi. Gundawindi was the 29th Infantry Training Battalion.
Just before we head to Gundawindi, I just want to get your recollections of Brisbane at that time. You've come down from Rockhampton.
Yes.
You've had a fairly wow of a train trip. You're walking across Brisbane. What do you recall from your days in Brisbane while you're walking across town? Because you would have got to see it sort of fairly close.
Well, along Brisbane it was just the park there. I think they turned it into a golf course. I wouldn't be you. They used to park the cars there at exhibition time for people to go to the show, and so there wasn't much to see. There was very little traffic, and so we were just strolling along the main road, just a normal stroll, I suppose you'd say. There was no marching or anything like that. It was just a morning exercise. And that's about all we did at the showgrounds, and that was a day's work.
Looking across Brisbane, were many people watching what you were doing? Because it must have stood out to a degree.
No, not really. There wasn't much population there along, I think it was Gilchrist Avenue, I wouldn't be sure. There'd only be an odd car passing, and no one took any notice at all, for what I could see. No one would sing out to us, or we wouldn't sing out to them, and it was just a normal stroll.
So at this stage, what are you finding out about what's happening and what's going to happen for you guys?
Well, I can't recall a thing, actually, because just like a little holiday to us. We were enjoying it, and we weren't doing anything, and having our meals, and
the sergeant must have been a bit of a character, though. A couple of pots at the pub at the other end.
He was pretty cunning. The tram had come along, and it'd start off, and then he would dismiss us as the tram started. So we couldn't get over the road because the tram was blocking us, and there was always one or two cars behind the tram. So he used to get into his pot. Because when they opened the door, he'd always order 2 pots for himself. So he'd have one drink, and he'd be on his second one by the time we got over.
So he wasn't the real regimental sergeant major. He was pretty relaxed by the sound of things.
Well, no, not really. He was more casual than we were, I'd say. He was just enjoying after returning from the Middle East. Some of them were knocked around pretty bad.
Did he give you any insight of his...
No, he never passed on any what we were up to or what we were going to do, or not a thing. Just a passing sergeant, yes.
Heading out to Gundawindi, do you remember much about the trip out there?
No, it was just a train load, and when we got out there, it was drizzly rain and cold, and we were just down from Rockhampton, which was warm, and by the time we got to Gundawindi, they had no army tents. They were confiscated all the civilian tents, and we had to erect them, which none of us knew much about. I suppose we finished up with more like an American tent with a centre pole, and there would have been about 8 of us in the tent. We were just on damp ground because it was on a little bit of a slope, and we still never had much army clothes. I can recall one Saturday they said you can go to the dance at Gundawindi. We were out about 10 mile, I suppose, and we pushed the truck nearly all the way into Gundawindi. The road was slippery and muddy. I can remember this plainly. We got into Gundawindi about 9:15, up at 9:15, and we went into the hotel, and the publican seen us, and he said, "The beer's off."
He saw trouble.
So we thought, well, we're not going to get a beer. So we went to the dance hall, and the doorman wanted to charge us 2 shillings to go in, and the dance finished at 10 o'clock, so we weren't going to pay 2 shillings for a quarter of an hour.
No.
In the dance hall, because 2 shillings was quite a bit to us. Funny thing was, we got on the truck and we thought, oh, well, we've got to push this thing all the way back to the camp, and whether they changed the driver or not, it went like a beauty. Never had to get out of the truck once. He delivered us back to the camp.
So you never got to see any local girls out of Gundy?
Not one. No, we didn't see Gundawindi at all, actually, and couldn't get back quick enough to camp, sleeping on, we didn't know whether to put the ground sheet under us, or because the ground was all damp, and we were there about a week, I suppose, and they had one platoon of rifles. That was about 30 rifles, I'd guess, and the rest were using sticks as rifles. We were on parade, and they called out volunteers. I'm not quite sure if they said the field ambulance or not. Anyway, I said to my mate, come on, we're out of this. We'll volunteer for that. He said, what is it? I don't know, but I said it couldn't be any worse than what this is. So we volunteered, and next minute they were jabbing us with needles everywhere, and on 3 days, about 3 days, a train took us into a train, and off we were shunted to Townsville. So I would say roughly about 3 weeks from when we left Rockhampton, we were in Townsville, in what they classified in the field.
So you've gone to Gundawindi, then you're back in Rockhampton. Did you get a chance to see your family, or...?
No, we never even had time to go to the hotel. They only stopped briefly, and they gave us a meal at St. Lawrence. But when we left Gundawindi, they took us back to, I'm not quite sure, but I think it was a race course, and I'm pretty sure that the Americans were there then, and they cooked a meal for us. So we had a meal there, and then back on the train, and away we went.
You must have been pretty adventurous, though. You're 17 and a half, you're not 18, you're still sneaking into the pub for a beer.
Oh, yeah. Well, in those days, the age was 21 for a beer. But when you're in the army, well, when you had that uniform on, you could just walk in and order a beer. So it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it was. It's one of those things that I know, sneaking into a pub myself when I was still before I was legal. and it was one of those things that it tasted better.
Well, we had up in Rockhampton, we had the beer was McLaughlin's. 4X, I think, finished at Raglan, and McLaughlin's went from Raglan to just north of Rockhampton. And then once past Rockhampton, I think it was back to 4X then, all Blimber. And we arrived in Townsville after. Oh, they give us a meal in St. Lawrence, and in those days they give us a meal in the dining room, and all the silverware was still on the tables, as if it's a civilian route, and all the little teapots and sugar bowls and was all silver, well, coated silver. So when we got on the train, it moved about 2 feet and it stopped. And they said, everyone out, so we went out, and they said, well, someone's purloined some of the silver from the cafeteria. No one worried about it. The 2-up game started again, about 4 2-up games along the length of the train, and the lieutenant in charge of the train was just about pulling his hair out. No one seemed to admit that they'd purloined the silverware, and when you come to think of it, it's quite amusing that we're holding the war up over a few silverware. So after about, I suppose, an hour, no one handed in. Away we went again, back on the train, and we arrived in Townsville.
What did it look like in those days?
We didn't quite get into Townsville. The shunting was just outside of Townsville, and we were loaded into trucks, convoy, and away we went to a little place called Calcium. That's on the road to Charter Towers, about 30 miles out of Townsville. We were there was nothing, just the railway station. A siding, actually, and one side was Woodstock, and the other side was Reed River. And Woodstock, the Yanks were there. They had a fighter trip which he used to run parallel with the road. And Reed River had medium-sized bombers, and of course we had to be in the middle of them, and which, as it turned out, we never got any raids or anything. It did not worry us. We used to march every morning down to either Woodstock or Reed River, and of course the Yankee pilots used to take off on the airstrip, and we'd be covered with dust, and they delighted in zooming down on the top of us while we were marching, and we'd scatter everywhere.
How did you get on with the Americans?
Very good, actually. We did, yes. Couldn't fault them, actually, no.
So they were just having some good, clean fun, or, well, not quite clean.
just amusing themselves and covering us with little pebbles and dust and dirt. We never had contact with them. They were separate camps of their own. And I suppose it was about 8 miles either way. I use miles because I still can't use the kilos now.
So what sort of training were you doing at this stage?
We were doing mostly medical work, like stretcher bearing. Actually, I don't think the officers or sergeants knew much more than we did. In my opinion, we had to just about learn on our own. They would give us a lecture and straight through one ear and out the other, and I still don't think they knew much more than we did. And bandaging and tying up wounds and stretcher bearing, well, you only got to grab a hold of a handle and carry that, so there was no training in that.
So you'd signed up to be a stretcher bearer. Did you understand the implications of that at that stage?
No, not one bit. I only signed up because I wanted to get out of Gundawindi. So it didn't make any difference who we went to. Could have been the infantry, could have been artillery, could have been anything, but we finished up with the 19th Field Ambulance. One day I was singled out and they told me to pack up. They said, the surplus gear, I forgot to tell you that when we arrived at Calcium, they gave us all second-hand clothes. We were replacing cane cutters. They were let out of army duties because it was a protected industry. And they were all mostly big people, and all of a sudden the colonel looked at us and he's got a mob of, a couple of hundred of us, coughing and spluttering because we just had our needles, and a lot of them had the flu, and I think he broke his heart when he seen us arrive. We had to sort out all the clothes. The quartermaster captain, he just threw it to our clothes, and we had to try and find the ones that fitted us. They were pretty ragged. I was called out for some reason, and I was told to pack up, to put what gear I had in the pack and just take a pack for, they said, you'll be gone about a week. So I reported down the orderly room with a pack, and there was a truck there, and they said, there's your truck, hop in, so which I did, and went back into Townsville, the railway siding, and there was a train there full of vehicles, all trucks, and one little guard van at the end of it, and by the time I found someone to talk to, a sergeant, he said, put your gear in there. I gave him my papers they gave me. I never even looked at the papers, and I gave him the papers, and he said, all right, hop in that guard's van. And I couldn't get into it. There was that many people in there, soldiers, and a couple of blokes said, come on, we'll climb in the back of one of these trucks, which we did. We climbed in the back of the trucks, and after the usual wait, it shunted and went a few feet, and I think the poor old engine must have been one of the first engines up in Townsville. We got to a range, and the train couldn't climb the range, and we were going up to Cairns, Chilligo. The train went to Chilligo, and the truck I was in, one of the lads, he had a 22 nickel revolver. We were shooting at everything along the so there must have been a few roofs we hit along the road, or water tanks. Was the range where the train stopped, it must have been the Coranda range. I worked it out, because the train couldn't climb the range, so we had to wait and wait and wait until another engine come out and pushed us up the hill. We got to a place called Chilligo. On the left-hand side of the train, the CWA women had set up all the tables, and they give us scones, cakes and sandwiches, and they said, come on back tonight, we'll have a dance. So we thought, that sounds good. So they took us out about 12 miles and said, we'll camp here the night, and it was Walsh River. No going back tonight, that's for sure. And dug a bit of sand out and slept like a log. In the morning, they gave us something to eat, opened a few tins of bully and give us a hardtack biscuit. They said, well, you could start marching and the trucks will come along and pick you up. At this stage, I still didn't know what I was doing there. It was the 29th A Company, the 29th Infantry Battalion.
Did you have any idea of what you were going to face yet?
I had no idea whatsoever.
Was it just hijinks? Was it just good fun with the boys?
Oh, it was tremendous. We were just having a jolly good time, yes. It was more like a picnic out. The trucks picked us up and we pulled up for the camp for the night. Some days we'd only get about 12 miles for the day. I don't know if we were the first ones to follow the telephone line up to Cape York or not. Anyway, we stopped for the night, and next minute the sergeant's coming along singing out for Private McGreevy, and I thought, wonder what they want him for. So I admitted who I was, and he said, "You're the first aid man." This was the first time that I knew that I was the first aid RAP for about 100 blokes, and I was flat out putting a band-aid on, let alone doing anyone up. So he said, in future you travel on the last truck with the mechanics. Oh, I said, oh, all right. And that was another argument getting into the truck because they were all had it like a home away from home. Their beds were laid out after a few arguments, and I said, well, I'm the senior man here, and I said, what? I said, I'm the senior. I said, I'm a sergeant, and I'm still 17 years at this stage. Well, they said, where's your stripes? And I said, oh, when you go into action, I said, you don't wear stripes. I said, you're the first one they shoot. So the corporals, they couldn't get their stripes off quick enough.
So they bought the story?
They, I was a senior man. They didn't know the difference, and it was quite intriguing and quite amusing. I said, no, I won't ride in the front seat. I'll sit in the back of the truck with you. So they were calling me sergeant, and I was the lowest one there, actually. And I don't know how long it took. It took us about 5 days, I think, to get to Portland Road Iron Range. And when we got there, we had two camps. First of all, we were camped in the jungle, and then they took us to another camp, and this time the ambulance had arrived, and our sergeant had arrived. And there was a sergeant, Private Houlihan, myself, and driver Cliff Barber. I remember the names pretty plainly, and Joe, he was a sergeant. He came from Rockhampton too, by the way, and so the strange thing was when you come from the one town, you seem to
stick together.
Yes. And he said, well, there's an artillery mob just arrived. I said, oh, yes. He said, I want you to go down there and be the aid man for them. There's about, they had about 6 25-pounders or something, and they were a return mob for the Middle East too. I just forget who they were now. They were either 6th or 7th Division. And all they could do all day was sing this song about Queen's Parade. I'd walk around all day singing this song, and I was the aid man there, and we were sort of isolated because I was still in the militia at the time, and they were all AIF people.
The fact that you were militia and they were AIF, what's the difference?
The difference in those days, they were elite, and we were lowly. We were way down the bottom, and they never knew I was militia.
What was the difference? Why were they so elite? Describe these AIF guys. Why were they so elite and a cut above?
The AIF when they enlisted, they could be transferred anywhere overseas. And the conscripts, when you turned 18, you had to register with the Commonwealth as being 18 years of age, and you were conscripted as long as your father wasn't a judge or a politician or someone.
That was an interesting thing you've mentioned a few times about protected industries. Cane cutters had gone back to work because they were a protected industry.
Yes.
And you're also working originally for a protected industry in Rockhampton. Did many guys try and avoid the draft and try and stay in a protected industry, or was there more moving towards wanting to sign up?
I would say it would have been about 60-40. A lot tried to dodge being called up, yes.
What was the attitude towards those sorts of guys in those days?
Well, once we left Rockhampton, we had no contact with them whatsoever. So they just lived their life and resumed working, and there was no ill feeling or anything. It was just we'd gone and we were there. The AIF resented us because we couldn't be sent overseas, but it never made any difference because New Guinea was part of Australia. It was controlled by Australia, so militia could be sent wherever they wanted in New Guinea, which they did. And the AIF thought they were the best, I suppose. I think they were second or third. They were returned Middle East. Good bloke. Got a lot of blokes, all from West Australia. All big lumps of lads, and they were blasting out the gun pits, and one a rock hit his shin and skinned his shin pretty bad. And up there we had the Yanks, the 5th Air Force had a hospital, and they used to treat us too. All our casualties were treated by the Americans at Portland Road. He didn't want to go to the hospital anyway. And so I dressed him. I had pretty good.
How were you with the sight of blood? Were you any good with that?
Oh, yeah, no worries. That wouldn't worry me one bit. I thought I did a tremendous job on his leg, and I finished up. I had to get him up to the American doctor so we could get him on record for what happened. They painted it with Castellani's paint, which I was thoroughly against. I argued with the captain, and the colonel told me, he's a doctor, you know, and I said, yes. But I said, don't you think that's raw for Castellani's paint? And, oh, no, he said, he's a qualified doctor, so I said, all right. So they painted Castellani's paint on him, which is red rubbish. And
was it like an iodine, the Castellani's
it's like an antiseptic, like aquaflavian, only more powerful. And after about a week, I'd never seen him, and I said, where's Corporal, I don't know his name now, and I shouted, you mean Bombardier? And I said, what are you talking about? I said, he's got 2 stripes. He said, in the artillery, 2 stripes is a bombardier. So I said, yes, all right. So I seen him and I looked at his leg and I said, oh, God. And so I got the sergeant major and I said, look, I've got to get this chappie to the hospital. He said, when? I said, immediately. It was a Sunday. So away we go. He got an old Marmon something, Harmon or something. We put him in the back and took him to hospital. The doctors were just about getting ready to have their lunch, and found him, and I said, Colonel, I think you should have a look at this chappie's leg. I had a look at his leg, and he said, all right, get that operating theatre opened straight away. So Sergeant Major drove the car, and we said, the doctor said, oh, well, look, you might as well have our lunch now, seeing that we've got to work. And so after about 3 hours, he said, well, we saved his leg. I said, thank goodness for that.
So the injury just got worse?
Just got worse after it was painted, yes. Very bad. The Sergeant Major started talking about the Middle East to the Colonel, and the Colonel said to the Captain, you better get a bottle. So out comes a bottle of scotch, then another bottle, and we're drinking away there, and I said to the Sergeant Major, we'd better get back to camp. And he was a little tiddly by then. So we got in this truck and got out on the road and blew the lights. So we had no lights, and it was black as pitch. And away he went. And it's the most dangerous road I ever had. The Yankee trucks, there was about 6 inches of dust on the road, and the American trucks would come up behind us, and he put his foot down because he could see the road.
All right.
And the Yanks were determined to get around us, and which they used to, and we'd cop the dust, and we'd be in the black, and this went on for, took us about an hour to get back to camp, at least an hour. The lad who got his foot injured, he recovered, and we eventually got on pretty well with the WA mob. Then we were transferred back to Cairns. We loaded a boat called the Islander, and the crew was celebrating, so the army put the captain in his cabin and kept a guard on him, and the army started loading the vehicles. They loaded most of them, but the boat had to leave at a certain time, otherwise it would have sat on the bottom. We got away near enough, it was still bumping on the bottom. So we got away and we went to Cairns, and I returned to my unit. That's when they asked us to transfer to the AIF. At that time I had a Q number.
For someone that doesn't know, what's a Q number?
The Q number was the militia, the conscripted. And my Q number was Q138012, I know it as well as do. And then they gave me a QX number. That was AIF. They could send you anywhere they liked then.
What was your thoughts when you got the QX number?
Well, I'm a AIF now.
You're a cut above.
Yes and no. It didn't seem to make any difference to me, actually. I was just another number. And they could send us anywhere they wanted to. I suppose we were very proud that our 11th Brigade was then a QX Brigade, an AIF Brigade. We could be sent anywhere. And after that we did a bit of training. Kuranda was a good camp. It was more of a sporting complex. We were camped in the school ground, and then we had half the hotel, the bottom hotel. The American submarines personnel, they had the top half, they had the front half, and we had the back half. And in those days, the Kuranda Hotel was a 2-story building, so they had upstairs too for they were recuperating after their patrols because they were knocked around a bit with nerves and things like that. And
Had you talked to many guys about what they'd experienced at this stage?
no, not really. When Crook there, we used to swim in the Kuranda River, just down from the railway station.
No worry about crocs?
Oh no. Never seen any. never heard. Oh no. The only croc I did see was up at Portland Road, Iron Range. Enormous big thing it was. An American had shot it. They had it in the back of a truck. And that was the first croc I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. It was a big thing too. And he was boasting how he shot it with his 45. Americans had the 45 revolver and our blokes had the 38 revolver. Because the Owen gun, it used 45 ammunition, so the Yanks used to like to get our ammo for their, so they could shoot. They didn't have to explain to anyone where their ammunition was going. So they'd get our ammo and they'd fire it everywhere, and well, it didn't worry us. They were okay. We were the white-haired boys at Kuranda. The people there used to love us. We'd get around and we'd be, all we had to do was do a march of a morning, and that was our day's work. And the Kuranda Hotel, not the hotel, the railway station, they had a canteen there. And when the train came in at 10 o'clock of the morning, old Tess, we used to call her, she used to open the bar up. So we'd be first ones in there. And when the train left, she would close the bar, close the door. So we'd be in there till up past 12. And no one else was allowed in, so there was about 24 of us in there. And she used to look after us like a mother. And even when we went to the dances, we were well looked after.
What do you put that down to? Why were you so well looked after?
We had no fights, no troublemakers. Like the Top Hotel, we had part of the Top Hotel. Well, we never had part of the Top Hotel. They had a little gardener's shed at the back, handyman shed, and our mob used to use it for a cookhouse. And they would give her, say, a bag of sugar, or so the cook and them, they were well in with the proprietor there. That was a woman used to run that one too, and at the hotel. And they never sold beer there because they used to sell their kegs to whoever paid the top price, and they never had to pay staff or anything, so they were still getting their correct money for the kegs, and they were on a good thing too. They were happy and we were happy. We had our keg every dance night, which was a Saturday, and we were quite happy.
So it was still a big adventure for you?
Oh yes, we were still boys who were still on holiday, so to speak. We were eating well, drinking well, playing well, and then we were told to pack up, pull our tents down, which we did. And
so when was this? What year was this? Still 42?
This was 43. I was a soldier then. I was 18, so I was legal. And put our tents down. We were slept out in the open for about a week. Luckily we had good weather. They come in and at the dance on the Saturday night, all the people there, they formed a couple of rings and they sang the Maori farewell. They knew we were leaving better than we did. The next morning the trucks come in and we loaded up down to the wharf in Cairns, and we were put on a little steamer called a Dutch boat. It was Van der Linde, and away we went. We went outside the harbour and we joined up with the convoy.
How many were in the convoy?
Just a line of ships. You couldn't count them because we're escorts and ships. We had no idea where we were going. And when we got up to the top of Cape York, we veered left and we went into Thursday Island. We sat there for about a week, just sat there on the boat, weren't allowed to on the shore or anything, on TI. Then we found out we were waiting for an escort to escort over to a place called Moroki in Papua New Guinea. The escort came and away we went, and we landed in Papua New Guinea, Moroki.
What were your first impressions?
The first one was a rumour you had to have your hair shaved off because the disease, and everyone had their hair shaved off. Everyone got severely sunburnt, which didn't count for anything, which was just a rumour. When we got into Moroki, the same thing happened there. The officers were very smart. They put all the essential gear we want. Well, this is what we want badly. We want this badly, so that had to go on the ship first. But they'd forgotten that would come off the ship last. So when we got onto the Moroki, which was just a swamp, and I mean swamp, you'd build a slit trench and you'd only go down 18 inches, and there was about 10 inches of water in it, so we couldn't do anything. We had to do, if they come over, give us a bomb or two, dive into the trench, and we're only 6 inches below the water, below the lump of land, and the water table was there. Moroki was just a mass of little blocks of dry land and a little creek and not a creek, a swamp I suppose you call it. Even when we put our tent up, which we had to wait for about a week for our tent, because 62nd Battalion was there when we arrived, and they they finished up calling the 62nd Hydraulic Battalion, because they used to lift everything, and they were unloading the ship. By the time we got our gear, it had been all gone through, and anything worthwhile was taken. So we got our tents, which was the main thing, and the cooks got their cooking gear and put our tents up. It was the only time we ever had to take our own tents with us. The Yanks came in then, they were building the airstrip. We set up a hospital. I suppose we had 2 marquees. We could look after about at least 40 patients at a time. We were classified as medics then. We had to look after the lads.
Did you know what you were up against at this stage?
Well, we had an idea where we were going, and we had an idea that we'd be bombed pretty regular. Our first thing was camouflage everything as good as we could, and dig our trenches as good as we could. All we had there was bombers, and we never had bombers. When the Yanks built the strip, they put a metallic matting on board. When the bomb hit the swamp, they were okay because it'd just go down and all you get up would be mud and rubbish. But when they hit the strip, it was a different thing altogether. Our biggest raid would have been 17 bombers come over, and they hit the strip pretty badly, and the fighters, we had some Kitty Hawk fighters there then. They had the Air Force. I don't know how many planes they had. But when they went to land, they had hit the strip, and they never had enough fuel to get back to Horn Island. So every plane was damaged on landing. So we had no Air Force then for a while until they fixed the strip up, and we went on a few patrols. They said there were a few Japs around, went on small boats. We never, the patrol hit one lot, and we had one killed, but we were there 14 months in Murruruki. Apart from getting bombed and things like that, it was okay.
Did you have any fear? Did you have any worry about what might have happened if maybe you'd been overrun?
Well, we did, yes. And we had our course mapped out where and how we'd get there. We couldn't cross the Murruruki because that'd be going towards Mr. Nippon, so we had to go towards Port Moresby way. But there was quite a few rivers to cross, and we had to work out ways how we were going to cross these rivers. Because we'd heard about Rabaul, how they got knocked around over there, something shocking, and if we couldn't hold the nips back, we had to work out our retreat, yes. Oh, we worked out rafts and things like that, how we'd get across, and if it would have worked, we were more of a garrison. We had one battalion there and 2 battalions. The others were on the islands between Thursday Island and New Guinea. They were stuck on the all our 11th Brigade returned back to Kuranda, and same thing, pack up, we're going home, so we packed up and come back to Townsville.
So was that the end of your service?
No, that was just the start of it. We went on leave, and then we went to Strathpine outside of Brisbane. We were camped there for about 3 months.
Would have been bush in those days.
All bush, yes. And we went into a ready-made camp. Someone said it was the Yanks were there before us, but I don't know about that because they were all Aussie tents, and the Yanks had a different tent altogether. They had the square one with the centre pole, and we had the old lean-to ones.
Was there an us and them mentality with, the Americans on the other side, or were you all one big happy family as such?
We were pretty happy, yeah. We had I myself had no trouble with the Yanks whatsoever. I thought they were good.
Settling in at Strathpine, what happened then?
We were there about 3 months, and we were told to pack up again. Down to the wharf we went, and we put us on a boat, a Liberty boat called the Sea Snipe. And we were 4 bunks, 4 tiered bunks, and away we went to Bougainville. We went to Bougainville in December 44. That's when we actually got involved with action.
What happened the first time you saw action?
Pretty scared. Pretty scared. Especially when the shooting was around you. But, as long as you kept your head down, you were reasonably all right. Anyone who stuck their head up and had a look around, well, they were only asking for trouble. Keep your head well down, and even on patrols, if you if you could keep off the tracks, you weren't too bad. If you were on the track, and well, you were liable to get knocked over, which we did it. When I got wounded, we were on the track, and just the explosion went boom, and the chappie alongside of me, we were in trunks of enormous big trees, and we're in these trunks, and I said, "Where's all the shotgun rider?" said, "Where's all the blood coming from?" So we found my arm was bleeding, and so we stopped the bleeding, him and I, and I said, "Well, what's wrong with Bailey? We better have a look at him." He was lying, and turned him over, and he had his throat torn out. And I said, "Well, can't do anything for Dave." And there was all the shooting going on, and hand grenades being thrown around, and singing going on. And I said to the shotgun rider, "Well, we're not going there anywhere." I said, "We'll stay in this hollow and see what's going on." So someone said, "Get out," and someone said, "Stay where you are." So we stayed where we are, and after about an hour, well, I threw a few grenades too. I don't know what I was throwing them at, but I threw them away from where we were, and after about an hour, all these troops came in, and I said, "Where'd this mob come from?" They're all in nice new jungle greens, and I still don't know where they come from. They're all our troops, and they said, "All right, everyone's clear, the Nippon's gone, you can get out now." So thank goodness for that. And the bloke we were carrying, he had a head wound. And I said, "Well, we can't carry you." "No," but he said, "I can walk." So, "Well, as long as you lead me," I said, "All right." I got one side of him, and the shotgun rider got the other side of him.
Because you were injured yourself at this stage.
Yes, yeah. I was injured, but I was. I'd got over the shock. I'd put a lot of blood, but a couple of cuts and bump on the head, and a couple of shrapnel wounds, and I said, "Yeah, well, I'll lead one side," and he said, "I'll lead the other." So away we went, which was nasty, but quite intriguing actually, because in Shorty Hall, he had all there ripped open, and I looked at him and I thought, "Oh, well, he's not going to last much longer." And but it was only, he had a bit of a paunch, it was only fat. So Shorty come out all right. And
how were you feeling at this stage, seeing this sort of thing?
Well, I'd recovered from the shock, then I was just accepting it. I wasn't worried or anything like that. I just, well, I thought, this is natural. This is what we got to contend with, put up with.
When did it really start feeling real that, wow, we're in the middle of this and it's maybe not what I signed up for?
No, I fully expected it actually. A little bit of a shock at first, but then we thought we'd get knocked off, and it happened, and we were lucky we were lasted so long, and because we'd been involved in it for about 3 months, going out on patrols and coming back, and we thought our luck had run out, and That was it.
Were you hearing stories of things like what was happening in other areas like Kokoda, or were you getting reports of what was happening in other areas, say New Guinea?
No. Even on Bougainville, we were north and south. Bougainville was a base called Torquena. It was just a perimeter, like a half moon, and the Yanks were inside that perimeter, and they never went out. They just sat there, and they had it all protected, mines everywhere, barbed wire. So they never went out looking for trouble, which was the proper thing to do. And our mob, Blamey, Tom Blamey, whatever his name was, he decided that we were going to clean up Bougainville. Apparently, from what I gathered, MacArthur said, why don't you just let them wither on the Rhine, just sit back like we're doing, and because the Japanese couldn't do a thing on Bougainville.
Why is that?
They had no food, they couldn't get reinforcements, their ammunition was been there for a year or 18 months or something. They were growing their own vegetables or what they could, or get the natives, and they weren't looking for trouble. They had never come down the perimeter. They were doing nothing on Bougainville. But our mob decided that we'd clean them out, which was I think we lost about 800 troops there, which was for cleaning up, which was shocking. I don't know how many wounded, but Vietnam, we had more killed in 8 months in Bougainville than Vietnam in 11 years. So I don't know why, I don't know. So whether we weren't trained or green or didn't know what was going on.
Were you seeing much of that as a medic?
Well, when we'd go out in the patrol, you'd have to carry a rifle and all. So we were one of the lads. Yeah, we were. Some of us. Well, I could use a rifle because I did a bit of shooting before the war, and some of them couldn't.
You say 800 men essentially lost their lives on Bougainville. Are you losing many of your friends at this stage?
I lost Dave, who I didn't know too well. He was one of the reinforcements. When we were away the second time, we got another lot of reinforcements because the battalions were broken up. Our battalions were 31, 51, and 55, 53, and 26 Battalion. That was our brigade, because when the lads come home from the Middle East, they had to be reinforced, and they didn't want people from the training camps. They wanted experienced people. So they took half our 51, half our 31, so they had to amalgamate into one battalion to make up a battalion. And the same as the 55, 53. They had half the troops went to the 6th, 7th and 9th Division to make up their quota. So we had to, never had enough then for one battalion. We had to get two battalions to mix up to make one. That, so we could keep on the 11th Brigade. The 11th Brigade was Queensland Brigade, so that was our brigade.
Were you getting much news of other parts of the Pacific at this stage?
No, nothing at all. Like, even on Bougainville, we never knew what was going on down south.
So no news from home either?
No. Nothing at all. Even in those days, we never even knew that Darwin was bombed. So that's how much they kept it closed. Yeah.
What was your reaction when you did hear about Darwin?
Well, actually, we were shocked and surprised that they had so much bombing at Darwin. They had a lot more than we had, and we're totally surprised, actually. Yeah.
I was actually in Darwin for the 50th anniversary commemorations of the bombing of Darwin, and it was really kept very quiet. So I was, quite surprised myself how much had actually gone on in Darwin. But when you guys are actually on the inside not hearing about it, it must have been a real shock.
Well, it was, yes. We were a bit astonished, that Darwin and Broome were getting it over there, and we weren't. I think at one time or twice they flew over Townsville, but they only dropped a couple of bombs or something, and I think all they damaged was a palm tree they carted around in the back of a truck. Well, we were out at Calcium when the bombing at Townsville went on, and we never knew anything about it until about 12 months after.
Is that a good thing?
Well, no one seemed to broadcast anything.
How have you been left from the experience in New Guinea? How has it left you? Did it change you?
Yes, I was in shock for quite a while. I was lost. I didn't know what to do. When I did eventually get married, I said to my wife, I think I'll go back to New Guinea, and never did. But I myself, I did not like the New Guinea people.
Why is that?
I thought you could trust them as far as you could throw them. That's only my opinion, anyway. So you'd give them one cigarette, and you were the white-haired boy. Japanese would give them two cigarettes, and they were the white-haired boy. That's the way I looked at them.
So they just played the...
They definitely played it, yes.
What are your thoughts about the Japanese during the war? What are you thinking about them as an enemy?
Well, we had two Japanese lads in our unit.
Right.
They were Ron Assay and Les Assay. They were two Rockhampton lads. And their father was Japanese. He had a billiard saloon and a laundry saloon in Rockhampton. And I don't know, well, we protected them a lot. We kept them away from the front a lot, all the time, and they were good people. I went over to Japan after the war, and it was quite okay. It seemed to more humour than anything else, trying to talk, make them understand what you wanted, and they were okay. Well, then they were okay, yeah.
During the war, though, did you have animosity towards the Japanese?
No. I can recall one instance where I was in hospital at the time, and they brought a couple of Japs in, and the ambulances had like a tarpaulin flap on the back, and that tie them back and pull the stretchers out. And as there were a couple of provos were pulling this stretcher out with the Japanese, and he had it all aids, and I caught in the tarp, and I went to lift the tarp off, and the provo just pulled it out, pulled the stretcher out with the poor bugger on it, and I said, you'd be a useless so-and-so. And I didn't want to see him hurt, the Japanese, yeah, when they pulled the stretcher out.
These guys are POWs, and they've been captured and injured?
Yes. They were brought into our hospital, yes. That was at Torokina.
Is that an indictment on you as a person, though, that you didn't have animosity towards them?
Oh, no, I just, when I read later some of the atrocities that the Japanese did, it was, well, I thought that they were primitive. They couldn't have known any better on what they did, because the poor old private, the one above him used to belt him with a stick or something, and the one above him would belt him with a stick, and it just went up the tier to the officers.
Were you surprised by the atrocities by the Japanese?
I was when I read them, yes. Well, I never seen any. I was terribly shocked, yes.
When you went back to Japan after the war, what did you expect?
I thought they would be, a bit against us. I couldn't get over this bowing business. Every time you'd go near one, they'd bow, and you'd bow, and then they'd bow, and then you didn't. Well, you sort of didn't know when to stop. I thought to myself, this is going to keep going all day, this bowing. They were quite reasonable, I'd say.
What do you think about Anzac Day, and how do you celebrate it these days?
Well, sometimes I think back to, well, I had a personal friend got killed. He got a bullet in the tummy. That was in Bougainville, when we landed on a beach where, Bougainville, where no one had interviewed before, no one surveyed it, what it was like, and we landed there, and the Japs weren't waiting, but it didn't take them long to get there, and they come in heaps, and they give us a bit of a hiding. Not a bit of a hiding, they give us a hell of a hiding. And we had to try and evacuate. Our barge with all the heavy weapons, it hit the coral and stuck about 300 metres out from shore, and so we only landed with the light weapons, and we could only do so much. try and hold them off and get out of there as much as we could.
So getting back to Anzac Day, how do you celebrate it? What do you think of it?
Well, I think of Sucker. That was my personal friend. Old Sucker, that was his nickname, Sucker Bailey, and I still think of Sucker. His tummy wound, and which should never, well, it did happen. It couldn't say never. That upsets me a hell of a lot, actually. And Bailey, when I turned him over and seen, I think his name was I was playing bowls one day with a bloke, and his name was Bailey, and I said, if I were you, I'd change my name. He said, why? Well, I said, two personal friends of mine were named Bailey, and they were both killed up in Bougainville. So I said, that's an unlucky name you got. He wasn't too happy either.
Are you glad about the respect that you guys get now, and after you've come back? Are you glad that it's still remembered?
It's only when we arrived back, the Vietnam boys talk about no one welcomed them back. Well, we didn't get back until December 44, 45, and we came back, and the boat went in the top end of the Story Bridge in Brisbane on the north side, and there were two girls presumably going to work. They gave us a wave, and that was our welcome home. So they bundled us into trucks and couldn't get out to Maruka Red Bank quick enough. We were so that was 4 months after the war finished. So no one wanted. The war was finished. No one waved us. No one gave us a hoy. No one said anything. So we were just the government couldn't discharge us quick enough.
Did you expect some sort of welcome home parade?
Well, we thought we may have got a bit of a welcome home, but we got nothing, so to speak. We had, when we went to Rabaul when the war finished, we were watching a football match actually, and it had just started, and next minute whistles were blown, and they stopped the game, and they said all 11 brigades return to camp immediately. So we were bundled onto our trucks, back to camp, pack up, pack up, pack up, everyone screaming, and lucky we never had it really unpacked. So next minute we were on a barge, taken out to a boat called the Canimbla, and they had landing nets over the side. I looked up and God, I said, climb up, and that made me a bit windy, climbing up the side of this. I think it was the biggest boat we'd travelled on, the Canimbla. So up we went, and the bloke said, oh, you three, come with me, and he gave us a cabin. Oh, I said, that's good. The next morning, we were in Rabaul, and I said, I'm going to dread this climbing down this landing net. and they put down a gangplank, so we gangplank into barges and on the land, and we were in Rabaul about 3 weeks after the war finished, and we were garrisoning the Japanese POWs. So we were there until December, till they brought us home.
What are your lasting memories of the whole experience?
Well, most of it, I thought it was tremendous. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the comrades, people I lived in the same tent for a year on end. Well, they were like family, yes. My father died when I was 3 years of age, so I never had a father, so I was just like living from auntie to auntie. That was my life, I suppose.
Is it hard for you to recall and talk about these things, or is it just part of your life?
Just part of my life now.
Does it help to talk about it?
Yes, it does, actually. It relieves, yes. I haven't spoken... you'd be about the second one I've ever spoken to like this. Whether I've kept it bound up inside or... they talk about this PTSD. Sometimes I get upset, and sometimes, well, I'm diagnosed with PTSD. It never came in till after Vietnam War anyway. I think they call it shell shock, because when we were up at North Bougainville, we would get shelled daily. You could hear the primary charge of their gun they had up in the mountains, and we were in a sort of a bay, and over the other side of the bay was we had an ammunition dump. They would send over about 8 or 10 rounds a day, and 1 or 2 of them would be a dud, but the others you could hear them swishing, and you didn't know where they were going to land, and so you burrow deep then.
Did you ever think your number was up?
No, not really. No, I thought I'd get through.
Do you feel that you said you came home and essentially there was no welcome home for you, and then they couldn't discharge you quick enough? Do you feel a little bit cast aside by the government at this stage? What did you do?
I was very disgusted with the way they treated us. Well, they totally ignored us. They couldn't get rid of us quick enough. I think the 6 and 6 a day they were paying us was too much for the government. We don't know. We don't want you, mob. No one seemed to know who we were or what we were, and even getting on the trams, people would look at us and wonder why they're still in uniform. Wonder why this, and it wasn't because the war had finished 4 months before, and we were still in uniform. Because they started discharging them halfway through, about 6 months before the war finished.
Really?
It was all, your discharge come on a point system. Well, our brigade was a pretty young brigade. We were mostly young ones, and the AIFs, well, they were pretty old people. They were, in the 50s and things like this, and we were just. I was 21. We were still pretty young. A different category altogether. So that was life, I suppose. And all we did then was drink and drink and drink.
Trying to forget?
Yes. We always meet at the, used to be the Grand Central Hotel in Queen Street. We meet there, and even the RSL, they didn't seem to care. They never worried about it, because the RSL, they popped up everywhere. We had a branch at Windsor, and the president there was an ex-colonel, the vice president was an ex-major, so they were still running things, or thought they were.
Couldn't get it out of the system.
Well, a funny thing was, my brother-in-law, Alf, he was in the 47th Battalion. Him and I used to walk up to the Crown Hotel every day. The beer was rationed till 12 months after the war finished. And 10 to 12 and 4 to 6, I think the hours were, that was the pubs used to open. And to get a beer after, either had to get into the RSL or... so we were walking past the RSL at Windsor. It was in the council chambers, and they were unloading the beer for the meeting that week. So we helped them unload the beer, Alf and I. And bottled beer was like gold. You couldn't buy bottled beer. And we unloaded, I don't know how many, I think it was in bags in those days, bags of bottled beer. Anyway, we had the meeting, and I signed for the delivery docket. And we're at the meeting this night, and the president said, close the meeting, and Alf, sitting alongside of me, he said, what about the bottled beer? Oh, the president said, no bottled beer. I said, what are you talking about? No, bottled beer. And Alf said, well, funny thing, he said, we helped to carry it in the other day on the delivery. Oh, no, he said, no, that wouldn't be right. And of course I said, well, here's a delivery docket signed by me, I said. So many bottles of beer. And of course Alf and I were blackballed then. We were troublemakers. We were virtually told to get out of the club. That was my impression with the RSL in those days.
It's changed over the years?
Yes, totally, yes. Oh, yes. It's different now. They seem to cater for the troops, look after the troops, yes.
You're nearly 100 now. And it's a milestone you look forward to. Is it something that you never thought you'd make?
Never worried me if I made 100 or not, actually. Someone said, you're 96. I said, so what? I said, I don't feel like 96. It seems just natural to me that I'm plodding away, and 97, the president said, no, you're 97. No, I said, so him and I have a debate about it every time.
Well, it's been an absolute honour to have you here in the studio with me today, and to recall your exploits during the Second World War, and I'd say thank you to you And thank you to all of the guys that served. But thank you for your service. And really appreciate it. And thanks for joining us over the bonnet.
Yes, well, more people have been congratulating me in the last couple of years than in my entire life, yes.
Does it make up for it?
Yes, it certainly does, yes. The women, they look after me like I'm, as if I'm a baby now. I can poke along and they want to help me and carry me and but I can poke along, which I do, and get away.
Well, you are an absolute treasure, and thank you for sharing some time with us in the studio.
Thank you for having me. I've actually I've enjoyed our little time here. Yes, it's been mostly interesting. Yes, and you've been excellent for listening.
I'm sure many more people will. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, Mark, I thoroughly enjoyed our little chat anyway, so I'd like to thank you for it. Thanks very much.
Like I say, my pleasure.
Mm-hmm.